treatments because people are suffering severely, and you know that better than I do. So if I've said the same thing to defense and plaintiff attorneys, you know that there is no bias with that to which I speak. And nobody has to answer this question, but how many of you here take echinacea, and how many of you here take saw palmetto? And I just mentioned those because I was sitting there and said, well, how can I give you a sense of why the scientific process is important? Well, obviously, people feel that echinacea helps their immune system, and then they get fewer infections. And in fact, it may well do so. And it may not do so because of echinacea, since no study has ever demonstrated it, but because of the power of positive thinking. Does that mean that it's all in your head? No. We know that the psyche has a direct impact on the immune system, the nervous system, and the endocrine system. Absolutely, yes. And so people may feel better for reasons differently than what they attributed them to. Same thing with saw palmetto, to let your urine come out a little bit faster. Older men feel that helps, and yet, in fact, when you do studies, nothing ever confirms that is in fact the case. Why do I mention these? Well, there's this terrible disconnect. There's this disconnect between multiple chemical sensitivity syndrome, and it has no medical basis, and yet is a Social Security disability award. We've got lots of disconnects between science and society. And that's why it's important for us to pursue the scientific process. And so I want to share with you what that means. You've already gotten the bottom line from Dr. Manis about this, but we are very low on the learning curve. That is, we meaning the medical scientific community. We're low because this is virtually a unique exposure. Unique, yes, unique in that where has there been that kind of exposure before? Chronic, long-term exposure, hours at each day. The whole issue of an acute high-dose exposure versus a chronic low-dose exposure. Can there be issues with that? Absolutely, yes. So we have a unique exposure. Do we have a sense that there is a causal relationship? The answer is, I do. You know, it's a little like the OJ syndrome. I'm not talking about orange juice. I'm talking about O.J. Simpson. And if I were the attorney there, I would ask the jury, well, you may not have any evidence that somebody saw him do it, but the question is, if he didn't do it, who else possibly could have? So if it walks and talks and looks like a duck, it probably is a quack. And it certainly seems that there is a legitimate causal relationship between these health complaints and what these people are suffering from. It does not seem as though there are chronic irreversible consequences, but one cannot rule that out. It also seems as though, at least all the persons that I've interviewed, there is no malingering. These people want their houses back. They just want to feel good again. And of course, the older population that I see in South Florida has invested all of its money in its home, in their homes, and it's very distressful for them. And there is that reversibility. You move out of the house, or you leave the house, and you get better. You go back in, and you have symptoms again. And so I just told you the end instead of the beginning. But if that's the case, it's still imperative for us to follow a scientific process to determine if, in fact, our presumptions are correct. And you all know that because you are in the building business. You know you've had to deal with sick building syndrome. What is that? Nobody has to raise their hands. Very interesting syndrome. And in fact, does it exist? Absolutely. Does it cause chronic disease? Absolutely not, by definition, because when you get out of that building, you're better. And a building-related illness, on the other hand, is a chronic process. So if you happen to be in a building and you inhale tuberculosis through the HVAC system, you've got TB. We've experienced a learning curve with mold. What does mold do? Well, yes, we certainly know that it causes allergic disease. It can aggravate allergic disease. It can cause irritant sensitivity by the VOCs. It can cause allergic fungal rhinosinusitis. It can flare your asthma. It can cause hypersensitivity pneumonitis. No quiz on this. These are significant problems. On the other hand, does it cause mycotoxicosis? That is, does it cause the disease associated with mold toxins, where the person gets bloody noses and his immune system is no longer functional and he bleeds into his lungs? And the answer is no. Can mold toxins do that? Yes. But it does it by the excessive ingestion, not by the limited inhalation route for mycotoxic exposure. So what am I saying? Yes, some things. No, not others. Yes, the learning curve. Yes, a context for all of this. If you have a glass of wine every day, your heart might get better. And if you have 2 martinis after a Friday tough week, you might get a little tipsy. And if you drink a fifth of vodka in an hour at a fraternity hazing function, you can die. So the axiom in toxicology is everything is a toxin in the right dose. And so the gal who drank all that water in San Diego to win the contest before and not urinate died. She died because she diluted out all the electrolytes in her brain. So water killed her. Given that, how do we deal with approaching this in a responsible way? Well, we asked 4 questions, and I'm sorry that her husband isn't here because he introduced me to this many years ago. 4 questions. 1, what was the exposure event? 2, and this is all in my handout, by the way, in my article. 2, from which health complaints or conditions does the person suffer? 3, what can the agent in question cause? And 4, has the agent in question in fact caused this person's problem?